The wind howled through the pines like a wounded animal, carrying with it the bite of January cold that could freeze a man's blood in his veins. Silas Granger pulled his wool coat tighter around his shoulders and squinted through the swirling snow. His horse, a sturdy bay mare named Bess, picked her way carefully along the narrow trail that wound through the Snowhorn Mountains of Wyoming Territory. It was the 27th of January, 1877, though Silas had stopped keeping close track of dates years ago. Out here, time was measured in seasons rather than days, the green of spring grass, the dust of summer drought, the gold of autumn leaves, and now the merciless white of winter that stretched as far as the eye could see. Silas had been riding since dawn, checking his cattle in the lower pastures. At 42, he'd spent the better part of 20 years alone on this mountain, save for the occasional trip to town for supplies and the even rarer visit from a neighbor. The solitude suited him fine. After what happened in Kansas, he'd learned that a man's own company was often the safest kind. The trail curved around a massive boulder, its face scarred by centuries of wind and weather. That's when he heard it, a sound that didn't belong to the wilderness. At first, he thought it might be a coyote or perhaps a young elk separated from its mother. But as Bess's ears pricked forward and she snorted nervously, Silas realized the truth. It was the cry of an infant. He reined in Bess and sat still in the saddle, listening. The wind died down for a moment, and there it was again. Not one cry, but several, thin and desperate, barely audible over the whisper of falling snow. His hand moved instinctively to the Winchester rifle in its scabbard, then to the Colt .45 at his hip. In these mountains, unusual sounds often meant trouble. Following the cries, Silas guided Bess off the trail and into a grove of aspens. Their bare branches clattered like bones in the wind. The crying grew louder, more distinct. Now he could hear something else, a low moaning, almost animal-like in its pain. Through the trees, he saw them. A woman was tied to a fence post with barbed wire, her dress, what remained of it, hanging in tatters from her body. Blood had frozen in dark streaks down her arms where the wire had cut deep. At her feet, wrapped in nothing but thin cotton cloth, lay 3 infants. Their faces were turning blue from the cold, their cries growing weaker by the moment. Silas was off his horse before he'd fully processed what he was seeing. He pulled his knife from his belt and began cutting through the wire, trying to be gentle but knowing speed was more important than comfort. The woman's eyes fluttered open as he worked. They were green, like spring grass, but clouded with pain and something else, a kind of resigned defeat he'd seen before in wounded animals. "Easy now," he muttered, though he wasn't sure if he was talking to her or himself. The wire was wrapped tight, cutting into her wrists and arms. "This is gonna hurt some." She made no sound as he cut her free, just stared at him with those green eyes. When the last strand of wire fell away, she collapsed forward. Silas caught her, surprised by how light she was, like a bird, all hollow bones and no meat. The baby's cries had faded to whimpers. Silas shrugged out of his coat and wrapped it around the woman, then gathered the 3 infants as best he could. They were so small, so terribly small. Girls, all 3 of them, with wisps of dark hair plastered to their tiny heads. "Can you stand?" he asked the woman. She tried. Lord knew she tried, but her legs wouldn't hold her. Silas made a quick decision. He lifted her onto Bess's back, then handed her the 3 babies one by one. She clutched them to her chest with what little strength she had left. "Hold tight," he said, then took Bess's reins and began the slow walk back to his cabin. It was 3 miles through the snow, 3 miles with the wind cutting like knives and the temperature dropping fast. He talked the whole way, Not because he had anything particular to say, but because he'd learned that the sound of a human voice could sometimes be the thread that kept a soul tethered to this world. "Name's Silas Granger," he said, breaking trail through the deepening snow. "Got a cabin up on the ridge. Nothing fancy, but it's warm and dry. Been living up here since '58. Came out from Kansas after things went bad. You know how it is." The woman said nothing, but he felt her watching him. "Raise cattle mostly. Got about 60 head down in the winter pasture. Spring calving's gonna be good this year, I reckon. Course, that's if we all make it through this storm. Looks like a big one coming in from the north." One of the babies let out a weak cry. The woman made a sound then, a kind of desperate keening that raised the hair on Silas's neck. "They're gonna be all right," he said, though he wasn't sure he believed it. "Just a little farther now." The cabin appeared through the snow like a promise kept. Log walls chinked tight against the weather, a stone chimney that usually sent smoke curling into the sky. But the chimney was cold now. The fire he'd banked that morning long since dead. Silas helped the woman down from the horse and half carried, half dragged her inside. He laid her on the pile of buffalo robes near the fireplace, then took the babies one by one and nestled them beside her. Their lips were blue, their breathing shallow. Fire first, everything else could wait. He had kindling and dry wood stacked by the hearth, a habit that had saved his life more than once. The matches were in their tin on the mantel, kept dry and safe. In minutes, he had a blaze going, the flames casting dancing shadows on the log walls. Next, warmth for the babies. He pulled every blanket he owned from the chest at the foot of his bed, including the quilt his mother had made before he left Kansas. He wrapped each infant carefully, checking their fingers and toes for frostbite. By some miracle, they seemed intact, though their skin was cold as river stones. The woman watched him work, her green eyes following his every move. When he'd finished with the babies, he turned his attention to her. Her dress was soaked through with blood and snow. The wounds from the barbed wire were deep, especially on her wrists and arms. "I need to clean these cuts," he said. "Got some whiskey that'll do for disinfectant. It's gonna sting like hell." She nodded, the first real response she'd given. Silas fetched the bottle from his cupboard, along with what clean cloth he could find. As gently as he could, he cleaned the wounds and wrapped them in strips torn from a flour sack. She never made a sound, just clenched her jaw and stared at the fire, when he'd done what he could for her injuries. Silas heated some goat's milk in a pot. He'd been keeping 2 goats for milk and cheese, and now he thanked the Lord for that decision. Using a spoon, he carefully fed each baby a few drops at a time. They were weak, but they swallowed, and that was something. The storm hit in earnest as darkness fell. Wind screamed around the cabin's corners and snow piled against the windows. But inside, the fire crackled and the room grew warm. Silas sat in his chair, keeping watch, while the woman dozed fitfully on the buffalo robes. Near midnight, she woke with a start. Her eyes found his in the firelight. "They're sleeping," he said, nodding toward the babies. "All 3 of them. Good, strong heartbeats." "Thank you," she whispered, her voice cracked and raw. "No need for that. Anyone would have done the same." She shook her head slightly. "No, they wouldn't." Silas didn't argue. He'd lived long enough to know she was probably right. "You got a name?" he asked. "Mary," she said, "Mary Bennett." "And the little ones?" She looked at the 3 bundles beside her, and for the first time, something like life flickered in her eyes. I hadn't named them yet. He said there was no point. Said they'd be dead by morning anyway." "He?" But she'd closed her eyes again, retreating into whatever private hell she'd escaped from. Silas didn't push. There'd be time for questions later, if she lived. For now, it was enough that the fire burned bright and the babies breathed steady and the storm couldn't reach them here. He added another log to the fire and settled back in his chair. Outside, the wind howled its fury at the mountains. Inside, 4 souls clung to life, warmed by flame and fed by kindness and sheltered by walls built strong against the cruelties of the world. It wasn't much, but sometimes Silas knew it was enough. The fire had burned low when Silas woke, his neck stiff from sleeping in the chair. Gray light filtered through the frost-covered windows, announcing a new day. The storm had passed, leaving behind a world transformed by snow and silence. His first thought was for the babies. Moving quietly, he knelt beside the buffalo robes where Mary Bennett lay sleeping. The 3 infants were nestled against her, their small chests rising and falling in rhythm. Their color had improved, no longer the frightening blue of yesterday, but a healthy pink that spoke of blood flowing proper through tiny veins. Mary stirred as he added wood to the fire. Her green eyes opened slowly, focusing first on the babies, then on him. There was a moment of confusion, perhaps fear, before memory returned. They lived through the night, she whispered, wonder in her voice. They did, Silas confirmed. Tough little things and like their mama. He busied himself with morning tasks, giving her time to gather herself. The water bucket needed filling from the spring, and the animals needed tending. But first, those babies would need more milk. I'm going to milk the goats, he said. Won't be but a few minutes. There's water in the kettle if you're thirsty. Outside, the world was brilliant white under a clear sky. The storm had dumped near 3 feet of snow, transforming familiar landmarks into strange sculptures. Silas waded through the drifts to the lean-to where he kept the goats. Nell and Blossom bleated their complaints about the cold, but they stood patient while he milked them, their warm flanks steaming in the frigid air. When he returned to the cabin, Mary had managed to sit up. She'd unwrapped one of the babies and was examining her tiny fingers and toes, counting them like treasures. She's perfect, Mary said softly. Then they all are. Silas warmed the milk and found 3 small bottles he'd kept from when he'd raised orphaned calves. It wasn't ideal, but it would do. He showed Mary how to test the temperature on her wrist, how to hold the bottle at just the right angle. Slow and easy, he said. They're like calves that way, numb too fast and they'll choke. The first baby latched onto the bottle with surprising strength, her tiny hands reaching up to grasp at air. Mary's eyes filled with tears as she fed her daughter. First time? Silas asked gently. She nodded. He wouldn't let me. Said it would make me too attached. Silas felt anger rise in his chest but pushed it down. This wasn't the time. Instead, he took the second baby and began feeding her himself. The infant's dark eyes fixed on his face with that peculiar intensity newborns have, as if memorizing every detail. You know, he said. My sister had twins once, boy and a girl. This was back in Kansas, before I came west. I remember how she'd feed them both at once, one in each arm. Course, she had our mother to help, and me, when I wasn't working the fields. What happened to them? Mary asked. Silas was quiet for a long moment. Fever took them. Took most of the town that summer of '56. That's partly why I left. Too many ghosts. They fed the babies in companionable silence after that, broken only by the small sounds of suckling and the crackle of the fire. When all 3 had eaten their fill, Silas showed Mary how to burp them, supporting their heads with care. Hey, they need names, he said. Can't keep calling them this one and that one. Mary looked at each baby in turn, her face thoughtful. The eldest, she came first. I'll call her Faith, because I had to have faith she'd survive. She touched the second baby's cheek. This one is Hope. She came so quiet I thought she was gone. But then she cried out, giving me hope. And the third? Grace, Mary said firmly, because it's only by God's grace we're sitting here now. Silas nodded. Good. Solid names. Names with meaning. As the morning wore on, he set about making the cabin more suitable for his unexpected guests. He strung a rope across one corner and hung a blanket to give Mary some privacy. He brought in more wood, banking it high by the fireplace. From his root cellar, he fetched potatoes and dried beans, setting them to soak for later. Mary watched him work, the baby sleeping peaceful beside her. Why? She asked suddenly. Why what? Why help us? You don't know me. Don't know anything about me except what you saw. Most men would have ridden on by. Silas paused in his work, considering. Maybe, he said finally. But I'm not most men, and I've seen enough death in my time. Didn't seem right to add to it when I could subtract instead. He heated water for washing and set out what clean clothes he could find. An old shirt of his that would swim on her small frame. But it was better than the blood-stained tatters she wore. While she cleaned herself behind the blanket curtain, he busied himself making breakfast. Nothing fancy, fried salt pork and biscuits with molasses, but filling. Mary emerged looking more human, though the shirt hung on her like a tent. She'd washed her hair, and it fell in dark waves past her shoulders. The wounds on her arms were angry red, but clean. Sit, Silas said, indicating the table. You need to eat. She sat carefully, wincing at the movement. I'm not very hungry. Don't care. You're eating anyway. Can't feed those babies if you don't feed yourself. She managed a few bites, then a few more. Color began returning to her cheeks. While she ate, Silas fashioned a better sleeping arrangement for the infants, a wooden crate lined with soft flannel, big enough for all three. Tell me about this place, Mary said, looking around the cabin. I built it myself in '59, Silas said. Took the better part of a year, cut every log, placed every stone in that chimney. The wood comes from higher up the mountain, good straight pines that'll last 100 years if you treat them right. He pointed to various features as he spoke. The clever ventilation system that kept the air fresh even in winter. The root cellar that stayed cool in summer and unfrozen in winter. The spring-fed well just outside that never ran dry. It's 60 miles to the nearest town, he continued. Baxter's Creek. Not much there. General store, saloon, blacksmith. I go down maybe 4 times a year for supplies. Rest of the time, I'm self-sufficient. Hunt my own meat. Grow what vegetables I can in the short season. Trade with the occasional trapper or Indian for what I can't make myself. Sounds lonely, Mary observed. Sometimes, but lonely's not the worst thing a man can be. The babies woke hungry again near noon. This time, Mary managed all 3 herself, moving between them with growing confidence. Silas watched from his chair, whittling a piece of pine into what would become a toy, a simple horse for when they were older. They'll need proper cradles eventually, he said. I can make those. Got some good cedar that would work nice. Mary looked at him sharply. We can't stay here forever. He didn't say forever, but you're not going anywhere until those wounds heal and these little ones get stronger. That's just sense talking. She seemed to accept this, returning her attention to the babies. Grace had finished eating and was staring at the fire with wide-eyed wonder. Hope was still feeding, making small, contented sounds. Faith had fallen asleep mid-bottle, milk dribbling from the corner of her tiny mouth. The afternoon passed quietly. Silas did chores, bringing in more wood, checking on his horses in the barn, breaking ice on the water troughs. When he returned, he found Mary singing softly to the babies. She stopped when she saw him. "Don't mind me," he said. "Been a long time since there was singing in this cabin." "My mother used to sing that to me," she said. "It's the only thing I remember clearly about her. She died when I was 7. Mine passed when I was 15, Silas offered. Consumption, tough woman, though, kept the farm running even when Pa was drunk more often than sober. They shared stories as the afternoon light slanted through the windows. Simple things, childhood memories, favorite foods, the way the seasons changed in different parts of the country. Safe topics that skirted around the darker truths both carried. As evening approached, Silas prepared supper, a hearty stew with the beans he'd soaked and chunks of venison from his smokehouse. Mary ate with better appetite this time, the babies content in their makeshift cradle. "I can't remember the last time I felt warm," she said suddenly. "Really warm, I mean, not just my body, but—" She gestured vaguely at her chest. "I know what you mean," Silas said. The fire burned bright as darkness fell again. Outside, the winter world lay silent under its blanket of snow. Inside, the cabin held warmth and life and the possibility of tomorrow. "Thank you," Mary said as Silas banked the fire for the night. "I know I said it before, but thank you." "You're welcome," he replied simply. "Now get some rest. Babies will be wanting food again before you know it." He settled into his chair again, planning to keep watch. But Mary's voice stopped him. "You can't sleep in that chair again. Your back will be ruined. There's room here by the fire." Silas hesitated. It had been 20 years since he'd shared space with another person. "Just for warmth," Mary added, "so for the babies." He spread his bedroll a respectful distance away, close enough to tend the fire but not so close as to cause discomfort. The babies slept on, unconscious of the delicate negotiations of their elders. "Silas?" Mary's voice came soft in the darkness. "Yeah?" "Eat what you said about subtracting death instead of adding to it." "I won't forget that." He stared at the glowing embers in the fireplace. "Just doing what seemed right. Maybe, but right's been in short supply in my life lately." The fire popped, sending sparks up the chimney. Somewhere in the walls, a mouse scurried. These were the sounds of home, of safety, of life continuing despite all odds. "Sleep now," Silas said gently. "Tomorrow will come whether we're rested or not. Soon." Mary's breathing deepened into sleep. The baby stirred occasionally, making the small sounds of infant dreams. Silas lay awake longer, listening to these new sounds in his old cabin, marveling at how quickly life could change. Yesterday, he'd been alone on the mountain, same as the past 20 years. Tonight, 4 souls sheltered under his roof, depending on him in ways he'd never expected to matter to anyone again. He thought of the woman tied to that fence post, of the babies left to freeze, of the cruelty that could drive a man to such acts. Tomorrow or the next day, when Mary was stronger, he'd need to know more. Need to know what danger might follow them up the mountain. But for tonight, it was enough that the fire burned bright and the babies breathed easy and a woman who'd known too much cold had finally found warmth. Silas closed his eyes and let sleep take him. There on the floor of his cabin, guardian of lives he hadn't known existed when the sun rose that morning. Outside, snow began to fall again, gentle this time, covering their tracks and buying them time. Time to heal. Time to grow stronger. Time to prepare for whatever came next. 3 days passed before Mary found the strength to speak of what had brought her to that fence post. The wounds on her arms had begun to heal, though they'd likely scar. The babies thrived on goat's milk and warmth, their cries growing stronger each day. Faith, the eldest by mere minutes, had already shown herself to be the demanding one. Hope was quieter, content to observe the world with dark, serious eyes. Grace, the smallest, possessed a grip that could shame a grown man. It was evening, the supper dishes cleared away, when Mary finally broke her silence. Silas was mending a bridle by the fire while she rocked Grace in her arms. The other two slept in their wooden box cradle, which Silas had improved with rockers carved from pine. "His name is Joseph Quinn," she said suddenly, as if continuing a conversation they'd been having all along. "My husband, or was. I don't rightly know if I'm wife or widow now." Silas set down his work but said nothing, letting her find her own pace. "I was 17 when we married. My father owed him money, a lot of money from a business venture gone bad. Joseph offered to forgive the debt if—" She shifted Grace to her other arm. "If he could have me instead." "Your father agreed to that?" "He didn't have much choice. Joseph owned half the county back in Nebraska. Still does, I suppose. Cattle, land, even the bank. Cross him and you'd find yourself ruined faster than summer lightning." She stared into the fire, seeming to see something beyond the flames. He was handsome enough, and charming when it suited him. Those first months, I thought maybe it wouldn't be so bad. He gave me pretty dresses, took me to church on Sundays, showed me off like a prize horse. When did it change? When I failed to give him a son. Her voice went flat, matter of fact. First year, nothing. He took me to doctors, made me drink all manner of tonics. Second year, I lost one early. He blamed me, said I was too weak, too frail. Started keeping me in the house, watching what I ate, who I talked to. Grace stirred in her arms, making small sucking motions in her sleep. Mary adjusted the blanket around her daughter with practiced care. A third year, I caught again, carried to term this time, when the midwife said it was a girl. She closed her eyes. He wouldn't even look at her. Told me to try again. Do better next time. That was Faith. No, that was Catherine. She lived 6 weeks. Fever took her while Joseph was away on business. He said it was God's way of clearing the slate so we could try for a son. Silas felt his hands clench into fists. He forced them to relax, picking up the bridle again to give them something to do besides imagine themselves around a man's throat. "I ran once," Mary continued. "Made it as far as Omaha before his men found me. The beating I took. Well, I learned not to run, learned to be quiet, be good, be what he wanted. And I kept trying to give him that son." "How many?" Silas asked gently. 3 more girls over the years. None lived past their first winter. Weak, he called them. Cursed. Said I was cursed too, that my womb was poison to boys and could only make sickly girls. She looked down at Grace, then over at Faith and Hope sleeping peaceful in their cradle. When I knew I was carrying again, I prayed every night. Not for a boy. I'd given up on that. I prayed for strength. For my babies to be strong enough to survive him. "Triplets," Silas said, that must have been a shock." The midwife went pale when she realized. Sent word to Joseph right away. He came home from Denver early, full of hope. 3 chances for a son, he said. The odds were in our favor. She stood carefully, laying Grace in the cradle with her sisters. The 3 babies nestled together like puppies, seeking each other's warmth even in sleep. When they were born, all girls, all healthy and screaming, he just looked at them, didn't say a word. The midwife wrapped them up, put them in my arms, and he walked out. I thought maybe he needed time to adjust. 3 babies at once, all needing food and care. Mary moved to the window, looking out at the snow-covered world beyond. He came back that night with 2 of his men, told them to take me to the north pasture. Said I knew what I'd done, knew the price of failure. The fence post, Silas said. She nodded. Said nature would sort out the weak from the strong. If any of us survived the night, maybe we'd be worth keeping. If not. She shrugged, a gesture eloquent in its simplicity. The men who did it, they say anything? The younger one looked sick about it, kept apologizing while they tied the wire. The older one just said Joseph's word was law on Quinland, and I'd best make my peace with God. Silas set the bridle aside and stood, adding another log to the fire. The sparks rose up the chimney like souls seeking heaven. This Joseph Quinn, he said carefully. He likely to come looking? I don't know. Maybe he thinks we're dead. Maybe that's what he wanted, to be free to marry again. Try for sons with a woman who isn't cursed. She turned from the window. Or maybe his pride won't let it rest. Joseph doesn't like losing. Even things he's thrown away. Well, he can't have you. Any of you. Mary looked at him then, really looked at him. You don't know him. Don't know what he's capable of. I know what I'm capable of, Silas replied. And I know this mountain. Man wants to come up here causing trouble. He'll find it ain't so easy as tying women to fence posts. She moved back to the fire, sitting in the chair opposite his. Why do you care? We're nothing to you. Just more mouths to feed. More trouble than we're worth. Silas was quiet for a long moment, choosing his words. My wife died 20 years ago. Sarah was her name. Sweetest woman God ever made. We'd been married just 2 years when the fever came through. She was carrying our first child. He paused, remembering. I held her hand while she burned up with fever. Held our son. He lived an hour, maybe 2. Perfect little thing, tiny as a bird. I buried them together under an oak tree, her arms around him for all eternity. I'm sorry, Mary whispered. After that, I couldn't stay in Kansas. Every corner of that farm held memories. So I came west, found this mountain, built this cabin, been alone ever since. Thought that was what I wanted, to never care about anyone enough to lose them again. He looked at the cradle where the 3 babies slept. Then I found you all in the snow, and I realized something. Being alone isn't living. It's just waiting to die. These little ones. They deserve better than that. You deserve better. Mary wiped at her eyes with the sleeve of his old shirt. I don't even know how to be free anymore. 6 years of being told what to do, what to think, what to feel. I look at them and I'm terrified I'll fail them like I failed the others. You didn't fail anyone, Silas said firmly. Man wants sons so bad he'll throw away daughters. That's his failing, not yours. And those babies that died, that wasn't your fault either. Sometimes that's just the way of things. Hard as it is. You really believe that? I do. And I believe something else too. Those 3 girls are fighters. They survived being born early, survived a night in the snow that would have killed grown men. They've got your strength in them, even if you can't see it in yourself yet. Hope chose that moment to wake, her small cry soon joined by her sisters. Mary rose to tend them, and Silas warmed the goat's milk. They worked together in comfortable rhythm, feeding and changing and soothing. When the babies were settled again, Mary returned to her chair. Tell me about this mountain, she said. If trouble comes, what should I know? So Silas told her about the land, the trails and passes, the hidden valleys and box canyons. He explained about the weather patterns, how storms came from the north but wind from the east meant danger. He showed her where he kept extra ammunition, where the root cellar connected to an old mine tunnel that could serve as escape route if needed. My nearest neighbor is Hattie Morrison, about 8 miles down valley. Good woman, tough as boot leather. Her husband died 3 winters back, but she keeps their place running with her 2 sons. If something happens to me— Nothing's going to happen to you, Mary interrupted. If something happens, he continued, you take the babies and go to Hattie. You tell her I sent you, she'll see you safe. They talked until the fire burned low, sharing the kind of truths that only come in the deep of night when defenses are down and hearts are open. Mary spoke of her childhood before her mother died, of dreams she'd had of traveling to San Francisco to see the ocean. Silas told her about the books he'd collected over the years, promised to teach her to read better if she wanted. I know some letters, she said. Ma taught me before she passed, but Joseph didn't hold with too much learning for women. Said it gave them ideas. A good thing you're not his woman anymore then. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Mary looked at him across the dying fire, something shifting in her green eyes. No, she said softly. I'm not anybody's woman now, just Mary, just myself. That's enough, Silas said, more than enough. As if in agreement, Faith let out a small cry, not of hunger or distress, but the simple sound of a baby announcing her presence in the world. Her sisters stirred but didn't wake, content in their shared warmth. I should name them proper, Mary said suddenly. With last names, I mean, they can't be Quinns. I won't have them carrying that weight. What was your name before? E. Bennett, Mary Catherine Bennett. Then they're Bennett girls, Faith, Hope, and Grace Bennett. Good strong names for good strong girls. Mary smiled then, the first real smile he'd seen from her. It transformed her face, revealing the girl she must have been before Joseph Quinn got his hands on her. Bennett girls, she repeated. Yes, that sounds right. The fire had burned to embers now, the cabin cooling as night deepened its grip. They prepared for sleep in what had become their routine, Mary with the babies on the buffalo robes, Silas on his bedroll nearby. But before she lay down, Mary touched his shoulder. Silas, thank you for listening, for not judging. Nothing to judge. You did what you had to do to survive. Now you get to do more than that. You get to live. She squeezed his shoulder gently, then moved to tend the babies one last time before sleep. Silas lay in the darkness, listening to the small sounds of his no longer empty cabin, and thought about the weight of stories shared and burdens halved. Somewhere out there in the Nebraska flatlands, a man named Joseph Quinn might be planning his next move. But here on the mountain, in a cabin built by hands that knew honest work, a woman and 3 baby girls were safe. For now, that was enough. Tomorrow he'd start teaching Mary to shoot. The warning came on a cold February morning, 2 weeks after Mary had told her story. Silas was splitting wood behind the cabin when he heard horses approaching, not the steady plod of a neighbor visiting, but the urgent gallop of someone bearing news. Hattie Morrison rode into view, her gray mare lathered with sweat despite the cold. She was a woman of 50-some years, built solid as the mountains themselves, with steel-gray hair bundled under a man's hat and eyes that missed nothing. Her rifle rode easy in its scabbard, and Silas knew she could use it better than most men. Silas Granger, she called out, reining in hard. We got trouble brewing. He set down his axe, wiping his hands on his pants. Light and set, Hattie, what's got you riding so hard? She swung down from the saddle with surprising grace for her size. Was in town yesterday for supplies. Heard talk at Murphy's store. 4 men been asking questions about a woman and 3 babies. Say she's touched in the head. Dangerous. Say her husband's offering good money for information. Silas felt his jaw tighten. That's so. That ain't the worst of it. One of them men, ugly fellow with a scar down his cheek, said they'd already checked the settlements to the south. Now they're working their way north. She looked him straight in the eye. They'll be heading up the mountain roads within a day or two. You see these men yourself? I did. Watched them from the feed store while they questioned old Sam Tucker. Hard cases, all of them. The kind that enjoy their work, if you take my meaning. Silas nodded slowly. I appreciate the warning. Hattie. She studied him for a long moment. So it's true then? You got them here? He didn't answer directly. You want some coffee? Long ride up from your place? Silas Granger. I've known you near 20 years. You never could lie worth spit. She glanced toward the cabin. She in there? Before he could respond, the cabin door opened. Mary stood in the doorway, one of the babies in her arms. She'd gained weight in the 2 weeks since her rescue, her face no longer gaunt, her movements steadier. But fear flickered in her eyes at the sight of a stranger. It's all right, Silas said quickly, and this is Hattie Morrison, the neighbor I told you about. Hattie's expression softened as she looked at Mary and the baby. Well, I'll be 3 of them, the men said. That true? Mary nodded, still wary. Faith, hope, and grace. Good Lord, 3 at once. Hattie moved closer, her weathered face creasing into a smile. May I? After a moment's hesitation, Mary held out Faith for inspection. Hattie took the baby with practiced ease, cooing soft nonsense words that seemed at odds with her rough appearance. A healthy little thing, she pronounced. Good weight, bright eyes. You've done well by them. Silas has done most of it, Mary said. I try to help. Don't listen to her, Silas interjected. She's been doing the lion's share since she got her strength back. Hattie handed Faith back and fixed Mary with a steady gaze. Those men in town, they work for your husband? My former husband, and yes, I believe so. He hurt you? It wasn't really a question. Mary's hand went unconsciously to her wrist, where the barbed wire scars were still pink and tender. Yes. And he'd hurt these babies? He left us to die in the snow. What do you think? Hattie nodded once, decisively. Then he'll not have you. Not while there's breath in my body or Silas's or any other decent folk on this mountain. She turned to Silas. What do you need? Information, mostly. How many men exactly? What are they armed with? Did they say anything about the law? 4 men, like I said, all carrying sidearms, rifles on their saddles. No badges that I could see. The scarred one seems to be in charge. Heard him called Luther. She paused, thinking. They were careful not to mention the husband's name, but one of them slipped and said something about Mr. Quinn wanting results. Mary made a small sound. Luther Kane, Joseph's foreman, he's a bad man. Silas. Worse than Joseph in some ways. How so? Joseph hurts people because they disappoint him or disobey. Luther hurts people because he enjoys it. Silas absorbed this information, his mind already working through defensive strategies. The cabin was solid, but not built to withstand a siege. The approaches could be watched, but not all at once, not by one man. I can send my boys up, Hattie offered, reading his thoughts. Tom and James are good shots, reliable in a fight. No. Silas shook his head. I won't have you risking your sons for my troubles. Our troubles, Hattie corrected. When men like that come to our mountain, threatening women and babies, it becomes everybody's business. They moved inside to continue the discussion. Hope and Grace were awake in their cradle. making the soft gurgling sounds of contented infants. Hattie's stern face melted at the sight of them. Lord have mercy, they're tiny as kittens. She looked at Mary. How early did they come? 6 weeks, maybe 7. The midwife wasn't sure they'd last the hour. Fighters, then, good, they'll need to be. Silas spread a rough map on the table, one he'd drawn himself over the years. There are 3 main approaches to the cabin, he explained, pointing. The trail you came up. Hattie, that's the most direct. Then there's the old logging road from the east, and the game trail that follows the creek from the north. Don't forget the mine road, Hattie added. Rough going, but passable if they're determined. 4 approaches, 4 men, Mary said quietly. They could come from all sides at once. They could, Silas agreed, but I don't think they will. Not at first. They'll want to scout, see the lay of the land, maybe try to talk first, convince you to come peaceful-like. There's something else, Hattie said. Sheriff Daniels was in town too. Seemed mighty interested in these strangers asking questions. You know how he feels about outsiders causing trouble in his jurisdiction. Bill Daniels is a good man, Silas said, but he's only one man with a star. Can't count on him getting here in time if trouble starts. They spent the next hour planning. Hattie would return to town, keep her ears open for more information. She'd also spread word among the mountain folk that Silas might need help, not asking anyone to ride into danger, just letting them know the situation. Most folks up here got no love for rich men who think they own people, she said. Might be surprised who shows up if shooting starts. After Hattie left, Silas set about fortifying their position. He brought in extra water, filling every container in the cabin. He moved his ammunition from the various hiding spots to a central location where it could be accessed quickly. He boarded up the 2 smaller windows, leaving only the front window and the rifle ports he'd built into the walls years ago, remnants of Indian troubles that had never materialized. Mary watched him work, the babies content in their box for the moment. I should leave, she said suddenly. Take the girls and go. This isn't your fight. Silas paused in his work. Where would you go? I don't know. Somewhere, anywhere he can't find us. In winter, with 3 infants, on foot, because I know you can't ride well enough to manage a horse and 3 babies. He shook his head. That's no plan, that's suicide. He's staying here might be suicide too, for you. He crossed to where she sat, knelt down so they were eye level. Mary, listen to me. I made a choice when I cut you down from that post. Not just to save you, but to stand by you. Man doesn't go back on that kind of choice. But why? Her green eyes searched his face. We're nothing to you. You're wrong about that. He stood, suddenly uncomfortable with the intensity of the moment. Now, I'm going to teach you to shoot. Can't have you defenseless if trouble comes. He selected a Navy Colt from his collection, smaller and lighter than his Army models. Outside, he set up targets, empty cans on a log fence. The babies were napping, giving them time for a proper lesson. First thing, he said, handing her the unloaded weapon, is respect. Gun's a tool, nothing more, nothing less. But it's a tool that kills, so you handle it like you would a sharp axe or an angry rattler. He showed her how to load, how to sight, how to squeeze rather than jerk the trigger. Her first shots went wild, but she had steady hands and learned quick. By the 20th shot, she was hitting more than missing. You've done this before, he observed. My pa taught me to shoot a rifle when I was young, but Joseph wouldn't allow guns in the house. Said women had no business with weapons. Joseph sounds like a fool, a dangerous fool. She lowered the pistol, checked the cylinder like he'd taught her. Silas, I need to tell you something, none about Joseph, none about what he's capable of. They went back inside where she could watch the babies while she talked. Faith was awake, staring at the play of light on the ceiling with infant fascination. Joseph doesn't just own land and cattle, Mary began. He owns people, judges, lawmen, even a federal marshal or two. When he wants something, he usually gets it. Money talks, Silas agreed, but money doesn't stop bullets. He won't come himself, not at first. He'll send Luther and the others. See if they can handle it quiet. But if that doesn't work... She picked up Faith, holding her close. He'll bring an army if he has to. He can't stand to lose. Then we'd best make sure Luther and his boys don't report back. Mary looked at him sharply. You'd kill them? If they come on my land threatening you and the babies? Yes, without hesitation or regret. She was quiet for a long moment. I've never known a man like you, Silas Granger. Probably just as well. I'm nothing special, just set in my ways. That night, Silas took the first watch while Mary slept with the babies. He sat by the front window, rifle across his knees, watching the moonlit snow for any sign of movement. The night was still, so quiet he could hear the soft breathing of the infants across the room. Near midnight, something caught his eye, a brief flash of light down the mountain, there and gone like a firefly. Then another, off to the east, signal mirrors, maybe, or the reflection of moon on metal. They were out there watching. He woke Mary quietly. We've got company. Not moving in yet, just scouting, but they're there. She dressed quickly, checked the babies. All three slept on, unaware of the danger circling their small sanctuary. What do? We wait. Let them make the first move. Meanwhile, you take the back window, watch the approaches from the creek. Anyone comes that way. You fire one shot in the air to warn me, then get down behind the water barrels. She took the loaded Colt and moved to her position. Silas admired how steady she was, how she'd transformed from the broken woman he'd found to this determined protector of her children. The night crawled by. No attack came, but the watchers remained. As dawn broke gray and cold, Silas saw them clearly for the first time. 4 riders positioned on the ridges around his valley, patient as wolves. They're waiting for something, Mary said, joining him at the front window. Full light, maybe, or reinforcements. He studied the riders through his field glasses. That one there, with the scar, that Luther? She looked where he pointed. Even at distance, the cruel slash across the man's face was visible. That's him. All right then, time to see what they want. He checked his rifle, then opened the front door and stepped onto the porch. That's far enough, he called out to the riders. State your business or move on. The scarred man nudged his horse forward, stopping just outside comfortable rifle range. Smart. Name's Luther Kane, he called back. Looking for a woman belongs to Mr. Joseph Quinn, his wife and 3 baby daughters. Heard tell you might have seen them. A man who leaves a woman and babies to die in the snow doesn't deserve to find them again. Silas replied. Luther smiled, an ugly expression on his scarred face. That's not for you to decide, friend. Mrs. Quinn is sick in the head, needs help. Her husband just wants her home safe. Funny kind of help, tying her with barbed wire. The smile vanished. You've got 1 hour to send her out. After that, we come get her. Your choice if you die defending another man's property. Here's my choice, Silas said, raising his rifle. Get off my land, don't come back. Anyone sets foot on my property uninvited, I'll drop them where they stand. Luther touched his hat in mock salute. 1 hour, Mr. Granger. Use it wisely. The riders pulled back but didn't go far. Silas went inside, barring the door behind him. He knows your name, Mary said. And had he warned me they'd been asking questions, doesn't matter. Names don't stop bullets either. The babies were stirring, ready for their morning feeding. Such ordinary needs in extraordinary times. Mary heated the goat's milk while Silas watched the windows. The riders had taken positions that covered all approaches, smart tactics that spoke of military experience. "Silas," Mary said as she fed Hope, "I want you to know something. Whatever happens, I'm grateful. For the first time in my life, someone stood up for me, for us. That means everything." "Save the speeches," he said gruffly. "We're not dead yet." But he understood what she was saying. In the next hour, their small sanctuary would be tested. 4 men with guns and cruel intentions against 1 man, 1 woman, and 3 helpless infants. The odds weren't good, but then, Silas had never much cared for odds. He checked his weapons one more time and settled in to wait. Somewhere out there, Luther Kane was watching the sun climb higher, counting down minutes. Soon now. Very soon. The hour passed like molasses in winter. Silas had positioned himself at the front window, rifle ready but not visible. Mary stayed with the babies in the back corner of the cabin, the safest spot if shooting started. She had the Colt and extra ammunition, though Silas prayed she wouldn't need them. At exactly 60 minutes, Luther Kane rode forward again, this time coming closer to the cabin. His 3 companions spread out in a half-circle, still mounted but with hands resting on their weapons. "Time's up, Granger," Luther called. "What's it going to be?" Silas stepped out onto the porch. Winchester cradled in his arms but pointed at the ground. No sense in seeming aggressive until necessary. "My answer hasn't changed. The lady and her children are under my protection. You'd best ride on." Luther dismounted, a calculated move to seem less threatening while actually preparing for action. "Let me explain something, friend. Mr. Quinn is a patient man, but his patience has limits. He's offering $500 for the return of his property. That's good money, more than you'd see in 5 years up here. Some things aren't for sale. Everything's for sale, just a matter of price." Luther took a step closer. Now, he'd prefer them alive and unharmed, but if accidents happen, he shrugged. "Well, sometimes sick women do desperate things, kill their own babies, even terrible tragedy, but it happens." Silas felt ice in his veins. The threat was clear. If they couldn't take Mary alive, they'd kill her and the babies and blame it on her supposed madness. "You take one more step," Silas said quietly, "and you'll be explaining to Quinn why you're short a foreman." Luther smiled, that ugly smile again. "4 of us, 1 of you. You might get 1, maybe 2 if you're lucky. But you'll die. And then what happens to the woman? What happens to those babies? Why don't we find out?" The voice came from behind Luther. Sheriff Bill Daniels sat his horse at the edge of the clearing, his deputy Jake Carson beside him. Both men had their rifles out, not quite pointed at anyone but ready. "Sheriff," Luther said, not turning around, "this is a private matter, no need for the law." "Funny thing about that," Daniels said, riding closer. "When armed men surround a citizen's home making threats, that becomes very much my business." He was a tall man, weathered by years of keeping peace in rough country, with gray eyes that missed nothing. "Mr. Granger, these men bothering you?" "They're trespassing," Silas said. "Asked them to leave, and they declined." "That's so," Daniels looked at Luther. "You boys got any paper on this woman you're hunting? Warrant, marriage certificate, anything that gives you legal right to be here?" Luther's jaw tightened. "Mr. Quinn don't need paper to reclaim his wife. Actually, he does. This is Wyoming territory, not Nebraska. Different laws here." Daniel smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "For instance, We've got laws against kidnapping, against threatening folks, against disturbing the peace. We haven't broken any laws, one of the other riders protested. Not yet, Daniels agreed. But you're about to... See, Mr. Granger here asked you to leave his property. You didn't. That's trespassing. You keep refusing. It becomes criminal trespass. You make any aggressive moves. It becomes assault. You actually try to take someone against their will. Well, that's kidnapping. And in Wyoming territory, we hang kidnappers. Luther's hand drifted toward his gun. Jake Carson jacked around into his rifle chamber, the sound sharp in the cold air. I wouldn't, the deputy advised. He was younger than Daniels, but had the same steady competence. You're making a mistake, Sheriff, Luther said. Mr. Quinn has influential friends, judges, marshals, even a congressman or two. Good for him. They're welcome to visit any time, but right now you're in my jurisdiction and I'm telling you to move along. Luther looked from Daniels to Silas, calculating odds. 4 against 4 now, and the lawmen had the drop on them. Not good odds for what Quinn was paying. This isn't over, he said finally. It is for today, Daniels replied. You boys head on back to town. In fact, head on back to Nebraska. Your business here is done. Slowly, with obvious reluctance. Luther mounted his horse. His men followed suit, keeping their hands visible but their faces dark with anger. He will be seeing you, Granger, Luther promised. Looking forward to it, Silas replied. The 4 riders headed down the mountain, Daniels and Carson watching until they were out of sight. Only then did the sheriff turn back to Silas. They'll be back, Daniels said. Men like that don't give up easy. I know it. Appreciate you showing up when you did. Hattie Morrison can be mighty persuasive when she sets her mind to it. Convinced me I needed to check on things up here. Daniels dismounted, gesturing for Jake to keep watch. Mind if we talk inside? I'd like to hear the whole story. Silas led him into the cabin. Mary stood when they entered, still holding the Colt, her face pale but determined. Ma'am, Daniels touched his hat. I'm Sheriff Daniels. This is my deputy, Jake Carson. Sheriff, Mary said warily. The babies chose that moment to voice their opinions, all 3 starting to cry at once. Mary quickly set down the gun and went to them, lifting Grace while trying to soothe the others. 3 of them, Daniels said wonderingly. Hattie mentioned it, but I didn't quite believe it. Faith, Hope, and Grace, Silas supplied. About 6 weeks old now. While Mary tended the babies, Silas told Daniels the story, finding them in the snow, the barbed wire, Mary's account of her marriage to Quinn. The sheriff listened without interrupting, his face growing darker with each detail. Joseph Quinn, he said when Silas finished. I've heard the name. Cattle baron out of Nebraska, rich as Croesus and mean as a snake, from what I hear. That's him, Mary confirmed, rejoining them with Grace in her arms. He owns half of Platte County. No one crosses him and survives. Well, he doesn't own Wyoming territory, Daniels said firmly. And he sure as hell doesn't own you or those babies. Can you stop him? Mary asked. Daniels was quiet for a moment, thinking. Legally, you're in the right. Man can't just take his wife by force, not here. We've got laws about that, but... He sighed. Quinn's got money, and money buys lawyers. He could tie things up in court, make claims about your mental state, try to get custody of the children. I'm not going back, Mary said flatly. I'll die first, and we'll all die first. Now, no one's dying, Daniels said. Not on my watch. Here's what we're going to do. First, I'm going to have Jake ride back to town and wire the territorial judge. Get some official paper started. Make it clear you're under protection of the law. What kind of paper? Silas asked. Restraining order, for starters. Maybe charges against Quinn for attempted murder, leaving you out in that storm. Won't stick, probably, but it'll make him think twice. He turned to Mary. You might also want to consider filing for divorce. Abandonment and cruelty are grounds here in Wyoming. Can I do that? Just end it. You can. Won't be easy with Quinn fighting it, but it's possible. We've got a lady judge in Cheyenne who doesn't look kindly on men who abuse their wives. Jake Carson stuck his head in the door. Sheriff, riders coming. Not the same ones, looks like neighbors. They went outside to see Hattie Morrison approaching with her 2 sons and 3 other men from the mountain community. All were armed. All had the grim look of people ready for trouble. I heard there might be some excitement, Hattie said, dismounting. Thought you could use extra hands. Trouble's past for now, Silas told her, but I appreciate you coming. This here's Ben Foster, Will Hutchins, and Carl Brennan. Hattie introduced the other men. Good folks, all of them. They remember what you did for Ben's boy when he got snake-bit that time. Silas nodded to each man. He knew them by reputation, if not well personally, the kind of solid, independent people who made the mountains their home. If those Nebraska boys come back, Ben Foster said, they'll find the whole mountain against them. We don't hold with men who hurt women and babies. I'm obliged, Silas said simply. Sheriff Daniels addressed the group. I'll be posting a deputy up here for a few days, just to keep an eye on things, but I think word will get back to Quinn that his boys aren't welcome. Might buy us some time to get legal matters sorted. The neighbors stayed for a while, drinking coffee and admiring the babies. It was strange to have so many people in his cabin after years of solitude. But Silas found he didn't mind. There was something powerful in community, in knowing you weren't alone when trouble came calling. As the sun reached its zenith, the visitors began departing. Daniels was last to leave, taking Silas aside for a private word. That woman in there, he said quietly. She's something special to you? Silas considered the question. She's under my protection. Her and the babies both. That's not what I asked. It's all the answer you're getting. Daniels smiled. Fair enough. Just remember, Quinn won't give up easy. Men like him, they see backing down as weakness. He'll try again, probably with more men and better planning. Then I'll be ready with better planning of my own. They see that you are, and Silas, that offer of a deputy stands. You need help, you send word. The law's on your side in this. After everyone left, the cabin seemed extra quiet. Mary was feeding the babies again, all 3 demanding attention at once. Silas helped, holding faith while Mary tended to hope and grace. All those people, Mary said wonderingly, they came just to help. Ye mountain folk take care of their own. You're one of us now. She looked at him over Hope's downy head. Am I? I've brought nothing but trouble to your door. You've brought life to this old cabin. Sounds I hadn't heard in 20 years. Babies crying, woman singing, laughter. He adjusted Faith's blanket. That's worth any trouble. Silas, she began, then stopped. Thank you for everything, for standing up to Luther, for not backing down. I told you before, some things aren't for sale. Not for $500, not for $5,000. A man's got to have principles, else he's not much of a man. That evening, as they settled into their routine, there was a new feeling in the cabin. Not quite peace, the threat of Quinn still loomed, but something like hope. They'd faced the first challenge and survived. The law was on their side. The community stood with them. Do you think they'll really stay away? Mary asked as she tucked the babies into their cradle. For a while, maybe. Luther will have to report back to Quinn. Tell him about the sheriff's involvement. That'll slow things down while they reconsider. And then we'll be ready. I've been thinking about some improvements to our defenses. better sight lines, maybe some early warning systems. And you're going to keep practicing with that Colt until you can shoot the eye out of a needle." Mary smiled at that. "I believe you'd try to teach the babies to shoot if you could. I'll give them a few years. Never too early to learn self-reliance." That night, Silas took first watch again, but the darkness beyond the windows remained empty of threat. Somewhere down the mountain, Luther Kane was probably drinking whiskey and planning his next move. Let him plan. Silas had plans of his own, and the high ground besides. He thought about what the sheriff had asked, about Mary being special to him. The truth was more complicated than he'd wanted to admit. In 2 weeks, she'd become part of the rhythm of his days, her quiet strength, her fierce love for her daughters. Even her stubborn insistence on doing her share of the work despite still healing, all of it had worked its way under his guard. But this wasn't the time for such thoughts. First, they had to survive Joseph Quinn and whatever he threw at them next. Everything else could wait. The fire crackled softly, and from the cradle came the small sighs of sleeping babies. Mary dozed on the buffalo robes, the Colt within easy reach. Outside, snow began to fall again, covering the tracks of the day's visitors, hiding the evidence of confrontation. But Silas knew it was only a respite. Quinn wouldn't give up. Men like him never did. They'd have to be stronger, smarter, more determined. They'd have to be ready. And they would be for faith, hope, and grace. For Mary. For the life they were building here on the mountain against all odds. Silas settled in for a long watch, rifle across his knees, guardian of dreams too precious to lose. March came to the mountain like a fickle woman, bringing warm days that melted snow into muddy streams, followed by nights cold enough to freeze a man's breath. The threat from Joseph Quinn had receded but not vanished, like a wolf driven from the flock but still circling in the darkness, waiting for weakness. Deputy Jake Carson had spent a week at the cabin before other duties called him away. In that time, he'd helped Silas improve their defenses, setting up watch positions and clear fields of fire. More importantly, he'd brought news from town. The territorial judge had issued a restraining order against Quinn and his men, and a lawyer in Cheyenne was preparing divorce papers on Mary's behalf. "It's not much," Jake had said before leaving, "but it's a start. Makes it official that you're under protection of the law. Now." 3 weeks after the confrontation with Luther Kane, life had settled into a new rhythm. The babies were thriving, growing rounder and more alert each day. Faith had discovered her voice and used it liberally, demanding attention with imperious cries. Hope remained the quiet observer, her dark eyes tracking every movement. Grace, the smallest, had proven to have the strongest grip and the loudest laugh when Silas made faces at her. It was a Tuesday morning when Silas found Mary crying. He'd been out checking his cattle in the lower pasture, making sure they'd survived the winter. The snow was melting fast now, revealing the green shoots of new grass beneath. When he returned to the cabin, he found her sitting at the table, tears streaming down her face while the babies napped peacefully in their improved cradle, one Silas had built with proper rockers and high sides. "What's wrong?" he asked, immediately alert for danger. She wiped her eyes hastily. "Nothing. I'm sorry. It's foolish." "Tears aren't foolish. Something's upset you." She gestured to the table where a piece of wood lay, a smooth pine board Silas had been planning to use for shelving. But now it bore 3 names carved in careful letters: Faith Bennett, Hope Bennett, Grace Bennett. "I found this in your workshop," she said. "You carved their names." I thought they should have something permanent. Every child deserves to see their name written proper. He was puzzled by her reaction. "Did I spell something wrong?" "No, it's perfect. That's why I'm crying." She touched the carved letters gently. "In 6 years of marriage, Joseph never once wrote our daughters' names. The ones who died, he just called them the girl or the disappointment. Like they weren't real people, just failures." Silas sat down across from her. "They were real, every one of them. Catherine, Rose, Elizabeth, and Anna." Mary recited. "I named them all, held them all, loved them all, but I was the only one who remembered their names. And now—" She traced Grace's name. "Now my living daughters have their names carved in wood by a man who isn't even their father. It's more than Joseph ever did. A blood doesn't make a father, caring does." She looked at him then, really looked at him. "Is that what you are to them? A father?" The question hung in the air between them. Silas had been asking himself the same thing for weeks now. Every time he held one of the girls, every time he sang the old lullabies his mother had taught him, every time he worried about their future. Was that fatherhood? "I don't know," he said honestly. "But I know I'd die protecting them, same as you. That's more than their real father would do." She stood, wiping the last of her tears. "I'm going to hang this above their cradle, so they'll always know they belong somewhere." While she tended to that, Silas went outside to continue his work. The warmer weather meant repairs, fixing winter damage to the barn, mending fences, preparing the ground for a kitchen garden. As he worked, he thought about belonging, about names carved in wood and the permanence they implied. That afternoon brought an unexpected visitor. Silas was splitting kindling when he heard a wagon approaching, not racing like Hattie with urgent news, but steady and purposeful. He set down his axe and picked up his rifle, then relaxed when he recognized the driver. Doc Samuel Hartley was Baxter Creek's only physician, a man of 60 with silver hair and kind eyes behind wire spectacles. His wagon was loaded with his medical bag and what looked like supplies. "Doc," Silas greeted him. "Everything all right?" "Afternoon." "Silas, Sheriff Daniels suggested I might pay a visit. Check on those babies I've been hearing so much about." He climbed down from the wagon, joints creaking. "Also brought some things you might need. Medicines, clean bandages, a book on infant care that might be helpful." "That's kind of you. Come on in." Mary looked nervous when they entered, clutching Grace protectively. Her experiences with doctors sent by Joseph to determine why she couldn't produce sons hadn't been pleasant. "Mrs. Bennett," Doc Hartley said gently, "I'm just here to make sure you and the little ones are healthy. No judgments, no reports to anyone. What I see here stays here." It took some coaxing, but eventually Mary allowed him to examine the babies. His hands were gentle and sure, his manner professional but warm. He checked their weight, their reflexes, listened to their hearts and lungs. "Remarkable," he said finally. "For premature triplets born in such circumstances, they're thriving. Good weight gain, clear lungs, strong responses." He looked at Mary and Silas. "You've done exceptionally well. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it." He examined Mary next, checking the scars on her wrists and arms. "These are healing well. You'll have scars, I'm afraid, but no permanent damage to the muscles or tendons. You're lucky. Silas saved us," Mary said simply. "And you saved yourselves by surviving long enough to be found." Doc Hartley packed up his instruments. "I'll leave some medicines, infant tonics in case of colic, salve for the scars, general remedies. But honestly, you need them less than most of my patients." As he prepared to leave, he took Silas aside. "That woman's been through hell, the kind that leaves scars inside as well as out. She's doing well now, But sometimes these things catch up with people. Watch for signs. Not eating, not sleeping, pulling away from the babies or from you. If you see anything concerning, send for me. I will. What do I owe you? Sheriff's paying. Says it's official business, checking on citizens under protection. He smiled. Besides, it's nice to see babies thriving for once instead of sick. Makes an old doctor's heart glad. After he left, Mary seemed lighter somehow. He was kind, she said, surprised. Most people are given the chance. That evening, as they fed the babies their supper, Mary brought up something that had clearly been on her mind. Silas, I need to start contributing more. You've been bearing all the costs, food, supplies, everything. It's not right. You contribute plenty, cooking, cleaning, tending the babies. That's just living. I mean really contribute. I can sew. My mother taught me before she died. If I had fabric, I could make clothes to sell in town, or take in mending. Silas considered this. You want to earn your own money. I've never had my own money. Joseph controlled every penny. I couldn't buy a hair ribbon without his permission. Her jaw set stubbornly. I want my daughters to see their mother as capable, not just dependent. All right, next trip to town, we'll get fabric and supplies. Hattie might know folks who need sewing done. Mary's smile was radiant. Thank you for understanding. Nothing to understand. Independence is important. I've lived it for 20 years. Later that night, after the babies were settled, they sat by the fire as had become their custom. Mary was mending one of Silas's shirts. Practice, she said, for her planned business. Silas was oiling his rifle, the familiar task soothing. Can I ask you something? Mary said suddenly. Always. Why did you never remarry after your wife died? Silas's hands stilled on the rifle. Never found anyone I could imagine sharing my life with. And after a while, I got set in my ways. Easier to be alone than to risk that kind of loss again. But you're not alone now. No, he agreed. I'm not. She set down her sewing. I'm changing things for you, disrupting your peace. Maybe my peace needed disrupting. He resumed cleaning the rifle. A man can get too comfortable with solitude. Forget there's a world beyond his own boundaries. I don't want you to feel obligated. Stop. He set the rifle aside and looked at her directly. I don't do anything out of obligation. I keep you here because I want to. Because this cabin's been more alive in the past month than in the past 20 years. Because those babies deserve a chance at life. And you deserve a chance at freedom. And what do you deserve? The question caught him off guard. I've got what I need. That's not what I asked. Before he could answer, Faith started crying, followed quickly by her sisters. The moment broke as they both rose to tend to the babies. But the question lingered in the air between them. What did he deserve? The next morning brought the first real warmth of spring. Silas opened the windows to air out the cabin, letting in the smell of melting earth and growing things. The babies seemed to sense the change, more alert and active than usual. We should take them outside, Mary suggested. Fresh air would do them good. They bundled the girls carefully and carried them to the porch. Silas had built a bench there years ago, and now they sat side by side, each holding a baby while the third lay in a basket between them. The view stretched for miles, mountains rising to the sky, valleys beginning to show green, the eternal cycle of seasons turning. It's beautiful, Mary breathed. I'd forgotten how beautiful the world could be. Hey, this is what they'll grow up seeing, Silas said. No, freedom in every direction. Hope reached out a tiny hand toward a butterfly that had landed on the porch rail. The first of spring. Her sisters watched with infant fascination as it flexed its yellow wings. I want to learn everything, Mary said suddenly. How to ride properly, how to shoot better, how to read the weather and the seasons. I want to know this land like you do. I'll teach you, all of it, and I'll teach them. She looked at the babies. They'll grow up strong here, independent. No one will ever tie them to a fence post. The butterfly took flight, spiraling up into the blue sky. The baby's eyes tried to follow it, their first lesson in how beautiful things could slip away if you didn't hold tight, but also how they could soar if you let them go. That afternoon, while the babies napped, Silas showed Mary his maps of the territory. He taught her to read the topography, to understand how water flowed and where game traveled. She was a quick student, asking intelligent questions, making connections he hadn't expected. You've got a good mind, he told her, though sharp. Was a waste. Quinn trying to keep you ignorant. He said educated women were trouble. He was right about that. Educated women don't stay with men like him. As evening approached, they heard horses again. Silas reached for his rifle, but relaxed when he saw it was Hattie with her son Tom. They were leading a pack horse loaded with supplies. He figured you might be running low on things, Hattie called out. Also brought something special. The something special turned out to be a trunk full of fabric, bolts of calico and muslin, thread, needles, everything needed for sewing. Belonged to my sister, Hattie explained. She passed last year and I've had no use for it. Heard from a little bird that someone up here might be looking to do some sewing. Mary's eyes filled with tears. I can't just take this. Sure you can. Emma would have wanted it used, not gathering dust. Besides, I've got a proposition. You make me some new curtains. We'll call it even. Mine are so faded they're more memory than fabric. After Hattie left, Mary ran her hands over the fabric like it was gold. This is enough to start a real business. Make clothes for the babies, for sale. Take in mending. You'll need a workspace, Silas said, already planning. I can clear out part of the lean-to, put in a window for light, build you a proper sewing table. You do that? Partners support each other's endeavors. Partners. She looked at him with those green eyes that seemed to see right through him. That's what we are, isn't it? Partners in keeping these girls safe and raising them right? Yes, she said softly, partners. That night, as had become his habit. Silas carved by the fire. This time it wasn't names but animals, a horse, a bear, a bird. Toys for when the girls were older. Mary sewed by lamplight, already starting on tiny dresses. The domesticity of it should have felt strange to a man who'd lived alone for 2 decades. Instead, it felt like pieces of a puzzle finally fitting together. The babies slept peacefully. The fire crackled warmly, and outside the spring night was full of promise. Silas? Mary said without looking up from her sewing. What you deserve is this family, home. Someone who sees your worth. He didn't answer, couldn't answer. But when she glanced up, the look that passed between them said everything words couldn't. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. Quinn was still out there, still a threat. The babies would need constant care. The ranch would demand attention. But tonight, in this cabin on the mountain, they had carved out something precious. A space where broken people could heal, where orphaned children could thrive, where names carved in wood meant belonging. The spring had come tender and fragile, like hope itself. And in that fragile spring something was growing between them, unnamed yet but strong as the mountains that sheltered them. Silas added another log to the fire and picked up his carving again. Beside him, Mary hummed softly as she sewed. The babies slept on, dreaming whatever dreams babies dream, and life, against all odds, continued. The storm came without warning on an April night when spring should have held firm. Silas woke to the sound of wind screaming around the cabin's corners and knew immediately that something was wrong. This wasn't a normal spring squall, this was winter's last violent gasp, dangerous as a wounded grizzly. He rose quietly, not wanting to wake Mary or the babies, and peered out the window. Snow was already falling thick, and through it, he caught a glimpse of movement that made his blood run cold. Shadows against the white, 3 of them, moving with purpose toward the cabin. "Mary," he whispered urgently, touching her shoulder, "we've got company." She came awake instantly, mother's instinct already reaching for the babies. "Quinn, he has to be. 3 riders that I can see, maybe more." He was already loading his rifle, checking the Colt at his hip. Storm must have given them cover to get close. Mary rose swiftly, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders. The babies stirred but didn't wake. "What do we do?" "You remember the plan? Take the girls through the root cellar to the old mine tunnel. Follow it east. It comes out near Beaver Creek. Make for Hattie's place. I'm not leaving you." "You are." His voice was firm but gentle. "Those girls need their mother. I'll hold them here, give you time to get clear." She looked like she wanted to argue, but another gust of wind rattled the windows, and they both heard it. Horses. Close now. Too close. "We go," Silas urged. "Now." Mary bundled the babies quickly, efficiently, as they'd practiced. Faith whimpered at being disturbed, but Hope and Grace stayed quiet. She'd gotten good at moving them all together, 1 in each arm and 1 in a sling across her chest. "There's food in the cache at the tunnel mouth," Silas reminded her. "Blankets, too. Stay warm, move careful. Stream might be high with snowmelt." She paused at the cellar door, looking back at him. "Silas." "I know. Now go." She disappeared down into the darkness, and he heard the hidden door to the tunnel open and close. Good. They were away. Now he just had to buy them time. A fist hammered on the door. "Granger, open up, we need to talk." Not Luther's voice, someone else. Silas positioned himself where he could cover both the door and the window. "State your business." "My name's Morgan Walsh. I work for Mr. Quinn. He's here to collect his property. We can do this civilized-like, or we can do it hard. Your choice." "The lady and her children aren't here." "Now, we both know that's not true. Smoke's been coming from your chimney all day, unless you've taken up cooking for 4. They're in there." Silas's mind raced. 3 men minimum, maybe more, in a blizzard, which cut both ways, hard for them to coordinate, but also hard for help to arrive, and Joseph Quinn himself was here, which changed everything. "Hey, Quinn," Silas called out. "I know you're out there. You want to talk. You come to the door yourself, not hiding behind hired guns." There was a pause, then footsteps crunching in the snow. When the voice came again, it was different, cultured, cold, used to being obeyed. "Mr. Granger, I'm Joseph Quinn. You have something that belongs to me. I've got 3 babies that you left to die and a woman you nearly killed. They don't belong to anybody but themselves. The law says otherwise. A wife's place is with her husband. Children belong with their father. Yet you forfeited those claims when you tied her to that fence post. She tell you that story?" Quinn's voice held amusement. "Poor Mary. Always did have an imagination. Truth is, she's sick in the head, sees things that aren't there, makes up wild tales. That's why I need to get her home. Get her proper care. A barbed wire doesn't lie, Quinn, neither do scars." The amusement vanished from Quinn's voice. "I'm offering you 1 chance. Granger, send them out, and you can go back to your quiet life. Nobody needs to get hurt. Too late for that. So be it." Silas heard Quinn moving away, heard him giving orders to his men. They'd try to rush the cabin soon, counting on numbers and surprise. But Silas had spent 20 years learning every board in this place, every angle, every weakness and strength. The first window shattered, and a gun barrel poked through. Silas put a bullet right beside it, driving the man back. Another window broke on the opposite side. They were trying to divide his attention. He moved constantly, never staying in one spot long enough to be targeted. His rifle cracked steadily, keeping them honest. Return fire splintered wood around him, but the cabin's thick logs absorbed most of it. "Burn him out," someone shouted. Morgan Walsh, probably. That was the danger. Fire would force him outside, into their guns. But the wet snow was an ally there. Hard to get anything burning in this weather. A rush of movement at the door. Silas fired through it, heard a yelp of pain. Someone cursed viciously. First blood to him, but it wouldn't stop them long. Time. Mary needed time to get the babies through the tunnel and down the mountain. In this storm, moving careful with 3 infants, she'd need at least an hour to reach safety. More gunfire, more windows breaking. The cabin was taking a beating. Then Silas heard something that made his heart sink. Footsteps on the roof. They'd gotten someone up there, probably trying for the chimney. He grabbed the pot of boiling water he'd kept ready and positioned himself under the chimney opening. When Boots appeared, he threw the water up. A scream, scrambling, then a heavy thud as someone fell off the roof. "Damn you, Granger!" Quinn's voice had lost its cultured tone. "You're going to die for this." "Maybe, but you'll never find them in this storm. They're gone, Quinn. Gone where you'll never touch them again." It was partly bluff. Mary couldn't be far yet, but doubt was a weapon too. The attack intensified. They'd found more men somewhere, or had them waiting. Silas counted muzzle flashes. 5, maybe 6 guns now. He was running low on ammunition, and they knew it. Then, through a lull in the gunfire, he heard something beautiful, the crack of a rifle from outside, but not aimed at the cabin. Someone yelped, and the attacker's fire shifted, confused. Another rifle spoke from a different angle, then another. "It's the law," Sheriff Daniels' voice boomed through the storm. "Drop your weapons." Chaos erupted outside. Silas risked a look through a broken window and saw shapes moving through the snow, some fleeing, others pursuing. Gunfire echoed off the mountains, but it was moving away from the cabin. A figure loomed in the doorway, Jake Carson, snow-covered but grinning. "You all right, Silas?" "Better now. How?" "Doc Hartley saw them heading up the mountain. Rode hard to town to get us. We brought friends." Jake's grin widened. "Turns out folks don't appreciate outsiders coming here to cause trouble." Silas sagged with relief, then remembered. Mary and the babies, they went through the tunnel. Tom Morrison's already heading that way with blankets and a wagon. They'll be fine. Jake looked around at the shot-up cabin. "Though you might need some new windows." Sheriff Daniels appeared, badge glinting despite the snow. "We got 4 of them. 2 more ran off into the storm. They won't get far. Where's Quinn?" They searched, but Joseph Quinn was gone, vanished into the blizzard like the snake he was. His horse was missing too. "He'll be back," Daniels said grimly. "Men like that don't give up easy." "Let him come," Silas said. "We'll be ready." It took an hour to secure the scene and tend the wounded. One of Quinn's men had taken a bullet in the shoulder, another in the leg. They'd lived to stand trial. As dawn broke gray through the dissipating storm, Tom Morrison's wagon appeared with precious cargo. Mary climbed down, babies bundled against her, face pale but determined. She took in the bullet-riddled cabin, the armed men, Silas standing bloody but unbowed in the doorway. "You're hurt," she said, rushing to him. "It just splinters. Nothing serious." But he swayed on his feet and she caught him. "Nothing serious," he says, "men." But her hands were gentle as she guided him inside. The babies, miraculously, had slept through most of their cold journey. They woke now, hungry and demanding attention, life asserting itself over violence. While Mary tended to Silas's wounds, more than just splinters, including a graze across his ribs he hadn't even noticed, Sheriff Daniels questioned the captured men. "Quinn promised us $100 each," one admitted, said it was legal just collecting his wife. "Illegal doesn't include attempted murder," Daniels replied. "You boys are looking at serious time." The one with the shoulder wound, younger than the others, seemed eager to talk. "He's crazy, that Quinn. Kept saying the babies were cursed, that they needed to be dealt with. Made my skin crawl, way he talked about them." Mary's hand stilled on Silas's bandages. "He means to kill them," she whispered. "Not take them back. Kill them." "He won't get the chance," Silas said firmly. By full daylight, the storm had passed, leaving the world white and new. The Morrison boys and several neighbors worked to board up the broken windows and clean up the damage. Hattie arrived with food and her no-nonsense practicality. "You can't stay here," she declared, surveying the damage. "Not until it's repaired proper. You'll come to my place." "We can manage," Silas began. "Silas Granger, you've been shot at, half froze, and your cabin looks like a sieve. You'll come to my place and that's final. Mary needs proper rest, and those babies need warm walls around them." There was no arguing with Hattie in that mood. They packed what they needed, loaded the wagon. As they prepared to leave, Silas took one last look at his cabin. In 20 years, it had never seen such violence. "We'll make it right again," Mary said softly beside him. "Better than before. It's just a building." "No, it's home. Where you saved us, where the girls learned their names, where—" She stopped, but he heard what she didn't say. Where they'd become a family. The ride to Hattie's was quiet, the babies lulled by the wagon's motion. Sheriff Daniels rode alongside, his deputy managing the prisoners. "I'll wire the federal marshals," Daniels said. "This has gotten too big for local law, and Quinn crossing territorial lines to commit violence. That's federal jurisdiction. You think they'll come? If for something this big, they'll come. Might take a week or two, but they'll come." At Hattie's ranch, they were welcomed with warmth and efficiency. Soon Mary and the babies were settled in a cozy room, fed and safe. Silas found himself in Hattie's kitchen, drinking coffee that could float a horseshoe. "You did good," Hattie said simply. "Held them off long enough for help to arrive. Almost wasn't enough. Almost only counts in horseshoes. You kept them safe, that's what matters." Tom Morrison came in, shaking snow from his hat. "Tracked Quinn's horse to Beaver Ridge, lost the trail in the rocks. He's gone, for now." "He'll be back," Silas said. "He's invested too much pride in this to quit. Then we'll be ready." Tom said, "Every rancher in 50 miles knows what happened. Quinn shows his face around here again. He'll find the whole territory against him." That evening, as Silas sat by the fire in Hattie's parlor, Mary joined him. The babies were sleeping, worn out from their adventure. She sat close, closer than propriety might normally allow, but after what they'd been through, propriety seemed less important. "You could have died," she said quietly, "standing against all those men. You could have frozen in that tunnel, but we do what we have to for family. Is that what we are, family?" He looked at her, really looked at her, hair loose around her shoulders, green eyes reflecting firelight, strength and vulnerability in equal measure. "If you'll have me," he said simply. "You and the girls. Not asking for anything you're not ready to give, just family, one however that looks. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she reached over and took his hand. Work roughened meeting work roughened. Both scarred by life but still capable of gentleness. I told the girls about you while we were in the tunnel, she said. How you were fighting to keep us safe. Faith reached for you, I swear she did. Like she knew. They're smart girls. They need a father, a real one. Someone who'd face down 6 armed men for them. Mary, I know it's too soon. I know I'm still legally married, and I know a dozen reasons why this is complicated, but Silas... She squeezed his hand. In that tunnel, all I could think was that I might never see you again. Never get to tell you. Tell me what? That you brought me back to life. Not just saved it, brought it back. Made me remember who I was before Joseph tried to break me. He turned his hand to intertwine their fingers. You did that yourself. I just gave you space to heal. And we healed each other, I think. They sat in comfortable silence, hands linked, watching the fire. Outside, the world was cold and dangerous. Joseph Quinn was out there somewhere, planning his next move. The law was coming, but slowly. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. But tonight, they were safe. The babies slept peacefully. Friends surrounded them. And something that had been growing between them all these weeks had finally been acknowledged. Fragile as spring ice, but warming toward summer. We'll go home soon, Silas said. Fix the cabin and make it stronger. All of us? All of us. If you're willing. I'm willing, Mary said softly, for whatever comes. The fire crackled, sending sparks up the chimney. In the next room, one of the babies made a small sound, not distress, just the noise of infant dreams. Mary rose to check, but paused at the doorway. Silas, thank you for everything, for being the man Joseph could never be. Then she was gone, leaving him alone with his thoughts and the warming knowledge that he wasn't really alone anymore. Might never be alone again, if he was lucky. Outside, snow began to fall once more, but gently now. Covering tracks, hiding scars, preparing the world for new growth when spring finally came to stay. 2 weeks passed at Hattie's ranch before they could return to the cabin. In that time, the federal marshals arrived, 3 stern men with badges and authority that even Joseph Quinn couldn't buy. They took statements, examined evidence, and issued warrants. Quinn was now officially a wanted man for attempted murder, assault, and crossing territorial lines to commit violence. But more importantly for Silas, those 2 weeks cemented what had grown between him and Mary. They worked together caring for the babies, took meals together, spent evenings by Hattie's fire planning their future. The girls thrived, gaining weight and personality, Faith bossy and demanding, Hope quietly observant, Grace cheerful despite her small size. The day they returned to the cabin was bright with May sunshine. Neighbors had been busy, new windows gleamed, bullet holes were patched, and someone had even planted flowers by the porch. As their wagon crested the ridge, Mary drew in a sharp breath. It looks like home, she said softly. It is home, Silas replied. Yours and the girls, long as you want it. They climbed down, Silas carrying Hope and Grace while Mary held Faith. The cabin door stood open, and inside they found surprises. New curtains at the windows, a proper baby crib built by Ben Foster, preserves and supplies filling the shelves. A mountain folk take care of their own, Hattie said, having followed them up. Your family now, all of you. As they settled back in, life took on a new rhythm. Silas worked his ranch while Mary developed her sewing business, orders coming in from town and neighboring homesteads. The babies grew daily, it seemed, their personalities becoming more distinct. It was a Tuesday evening in late May when everything changed again. Silas was teaching Mary to read from one of his books while the babies napped. The knock at the door was polite, not the hammering of threat. Sheriff Daniels stood outside with a well-dressed woman of middle years. She had Mary's green eyes and determined chin. "Mary," Daniels said gently, "and this is Mrs. Catherine Hartwell. She's your aunt, your mother's sister." Mary went white. "Aunt Catherine, but Joseph said you were dead." "Another of his lies, my dear." The woman's voice was cultured but warm. "I've been searching for you ever since I heard about your marriage. May I come in?" They sat around the table while Catherine explained. She'd lived in San Francisco, had only learned of her sister's death years after the fact, when she'd tried to find Mary. Joseph Quinn had told her that Mary had died in childbirth. "I never believed him," Catherine said. "Something in his eyes. So I hired investigators. It took time, but they finally tracked you here." She looked at the babies sleeping in their crib. "Triplets. My goodness. Your mother had twins once, before you were born. "I didn't know that," Mary whispered. "There's something else," Catherine continued, pulling papers from her bag. "Your mother left an inheritance. Not much. She married beneath her station, as the family saw it. But there's a small trust, enough to provide independence. Joseph couldn't touch it because he didn't know it existed." Mary stared at the papers. "How much?" "About $3,000, enough to start fresh anywhere you choose." Catherine glanced at Silas. "Though it seems you've already started fresh here." "This is Silas Granger," Mary said. "He saved us, all of us." Catherine extended her hand to Silas, a gesture of equality unusual from a society woman. "Then I owe you more than I can express. Mr. Granger." "No debt," Silas said simply. "Just did what was right." They talked long into the evening. Catherine had connections, influence. She could help with the divorce proceedings, ensure Joseph faced justice for his crimes. "I'm also prepared to offer you a home in San Francisco," she told Mary. "You and the children would want for nothing." Mary looked at Silas, then around the cabin, at the carved names above the crib, the curtains she'd sewn, the life they'd built. "Thank you," she said carefully, "but we are home." Catherine smiled. "I thought you might say that. Then perhaps I could visit occasionally, get to know my great-nieces." "We'd like that," Mary said. After Catherine left, she was staying at the hotel in town. Mary seemed restless. Silas found her on the porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold. $3,000, she said. "I could go anywhere, do anything." "You could," he agreed, though his heart clenched at the thought. She turned to him. "But I don't want to go anywhere. I want to stay here, raise the girls here, with you." She paused. "If you'll have us." "Mary," he struggled for words. "You deserve better than a broken-down rancher in a patched-up cabin, and you're young, beautiful, got family and money now." She stopped him with a finger to his lips. "I've had money. Joseph had plenty. What I haven't had is a man who'd face down 6 guns for me, who'd carve my daughters' names in wood, who looks at them like they're precious instead of disappointments. They are precious. So are you. To us." She took a deep breath. "I love you, Silas. I know it's too soon. I know I'm still married to Joseph. I know—" This time he stopped her, with a kiss gentle as spring rain. When they parted, her eyes were bright with tears. "Soon as that divorce comes through," he said roughly, "I'd be honored to marry you, raise those girls as my own, if you'll have me." "Yes," she whispered. "Yes to all of it." From inside came the sound of babies waking. They went in together to tend them, moving in the easy partnership they'd developed. Faith immediately demanded attention. Hope studied them solemnly, and Grace gurgled with what sounded like laughter. "Your mama's going to marry me," Silas told them as he lifted Grace. "That means you're stuck with me for a father. Hope that's acceptable." Grace grabbed his finger and held tight, which he took as approval. That night, they sat planning. The $3,000 would expand the ranch, build a proper addition to the cabin for the growing girls, maybe even start a small school for mountain children with Mary as teacher. "We could call it Granger Ridge," Mary suggested. "Make it official." "Granger Ridge," Silas repeated, liking the sound. "Home to the Granger family." 2 months later, the divorce was final. Joseph Quinn had been captured trying to flee to Mexico, was awaiting trial for his crimes. The federal judge who granted the divorce also had strong words about men who abandoned wives and children to die. The wedding was simple, held at the cabin with Hattie officiating. She'd gotten herself certified just for the occasion. Sheriff Daniels stood as Silas's best man, while Catherine held the babies. The whole mountain community turned out, filling the yard with laughter and music. Mary wore a dress she'd sewn herself, simple but elegant. Silas had trimmed his beard and donned his one good suit, but the stars of the day were Faith, Hope, and Grace in matching dresses their mother had made, passed from arm to arm among the guests. "Do you marry Catherine Bennett? Take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" Hattie asked. "I do," Mary said firmly. "Do you, Silas James Granger, take this woman and her 3 daughters into your life forever and always?" "I do, all 4 of them. Then by the power vested in me by Wyoming territory, I pronounce you husband and wife, and those girls official Grangers, kiss your bride, Silas." He did, to cheers and applause. Faith chose that moment to voice her opinion loudly, causing laughter to ripple through the crowd. The celebration lasted well into the evening. Tables groaned under food brought by neighbors. Fiddle music filled the air, and the babies were passed around until they finally fell asleep in their crib, exhausted by attention, as the sun set, painting the mountains in shades of rose and gold. Silas found himself on the porch with his new wife. The guests were starting to leave, calling out good wishes as they went. "No regrets?" he asked. "Only that it took so long to find you," Mary replied, leaning into his side. Catherine approached, elegant even after a day of frontier celebration. "I have a wedding gift," she said, producing an envelope. "The deed to this land, all legal and proper. Seems there was some question about the ownership, but that's settled now. Granger Ridge is yours, official and permanent." "How?" Silas began. "I have good lawyers," Catherine said simply. "And I wanted my nieces to have a home no one could ever take from them." After Catherine retired to the spare room, she was staying a week to help with the babies. Silas and Mary stood together in their home. Their daughters slept peacefully. Their friends had blessed their union. The land was theirs. "From that fence post to this," Mary said wonderingly. "Sometimes I can't believe it's real." "It's real," Silas assured her. "Real as those girls, real as this ring on your finger, real as the life we're building." They prepared for bed quietly, still marveling at being husband and wife. As they settled in, they heard one of the babies stir, Hope, making small sounds in her sleep. "I'll go," Silas said, but Mary caught his arm. "We'll go together. That's how we do things now, together." They checked on their daughters, for that's what they were now, in law as well as heart. All 3 slept on, unaware that their lives had just become officially secured. They had a mother who'd survived hell for them, a father who'd fight the world for them, and a home that no one could take away. 5 years later, Granger Ridge had become a landmark in the territory. The cabin had grown into a proper house, with rooms for each girl and a schoolroom where Mary taught a dozen local children. Silas's cattle operation had expanded, and he'd taken on hands to help manage it. Faith, Hope, and Grace had grown into sturdy, independent children who could ride horses, read books, and shoot straight, though Mary insisted they be at least 10 before learning that last skill. They knew their story, how their mother had been brave, how their father had saved them all, how they'd become a family against all odds. Joseph Quinn had died in prison, unable to accept a world where his will didn't rule. His fortune had been broken up by legal battles, his land sold off. Mary had received a settlement that she'd promptly donated to a home for women fleeing violent husbands. On this particular evening, as snow began to fall on Granger Ridge, the family gathered around the fireplace. Silas was carving a doll for Grace, who'd lost hers to the creek. Mary was reading aloud from a book of stories. Faith and Hope were playing checkers, arguing good-naturedly about the rules. "Tell us again about the night in the storm," Grace demanded, abandoning her drawing. "You've heard it 100 times," Mary said. "But we like it," Faith insisted, looking up from the checkerboard. So Silas told it again, how he'd held off the bad men, how Mary had led them through the tunnel, how the sheriff had arrived just in time. The girls never tired of it, their eyes wide with wonder at their parents' courage. "And then what happened?" Hope asked, though she knew. "Then we became a family," Mary said, "a real family." "The best family," Grace added firmly, as the girls prepared for bed, each kissing their parents good night. Silas reflected on the journey that had brought them here. A lonely rancher, a desperate woman, 3 helpless babies, and a winter storm. Unlikely ingredients for happiness. Yet here they were, the fire that had never gone out, just as Mary had once said. It had simply needed the right home, the right hearts to tend it. "What are you thinking?" Mary asked, settling beside him as the girls' voices faded upstairs. "About that first night, how you asked me why I helped, and you said you were subtracting death instead of adding to it." "We did more than subtract death," he said, taking her hand. "We added life. So much life." From upstairs came giggles. The girls were supposed to be sleeping, but were probably telling stories in the dark. Mary smiled at the sound. "Should we settle them?" "Let them be," Silas said. "Sisters should share secrets." They sat together, watching the fire, listening to the life that filled their home. Outside, the snow fell gentle on Granger Ridge, covering the earth in clean white, preparing for another spring, another season of growth. The lonely rancher wasn't lonely anymore. The beaten woman had found her strength. The 3 girls who'd almost died in the snow were thriving, loud and loved and free, and the fire that warmed them all would never go out again.